seamless transition between me and Dave in our final 15th episode of the Schnellenberger Family Foundation and Recovery Boot Camp Basic Training Family Edition. This is the conclusion of this series. We are going to restart the series, but we will talk about that later. We've made changes. We're looking at different technological advances and things of that nature. But before we do anything, let me take a moment, as always, and especially at the conclusion of the full curriculum, to give a heartfelt gratitude and thanks, first of all, to Coach Schnellenberger, Howard Schnellenberger, and Beverly, his wife, who are the heads and founders of the Schnellenberger Family Foundation, without whose generosity and love and commitment to helping you understand what's happening in the lives, your lives, as well as the lives of your loved ones, this would not be possible. And of course, to RBC, Recovery Boot Camp, for being our venue, our supporter, and really our family. And everyone that comes here is that as well. And finally, a heartfelt thanks and gratitude to you, because without you, this wouldn't be a thing. And hopefully we've been able to transmit something that has been helpful and proactive in your life and that you can utilize in terms of this information. So now, as always, I'm going to call Dave up, who's my friend and colleague and the COO here at RBC, to give some tech information. And then we're going to commence with the end of the slides. We're going to do the assessments, as you can plainly see. And then we're going to talk at length about the next cycle, and we're going to have a lot of input tonight. So here's Dave.
It's weird, I never get any applause. Thanks, Mark. Yeah, so, Mark pretty much said it all. We're really grateful that you guys have stuck with us and hopefully have learned some things that you're able to practice in your own lives, and we just couldn't be more grateful or satisfied with how this has gone. So just Mark hinted at it a little bit, but this is just series 1 of the Basic Training Family Edition program. We have our next series set to kick off in a few weeks. We have a lot of improvements in store, a lot of things that we're working on to try and make it even more effective and even better, if you can believe that that is possible. So I'm actually going to try something right now. Don't know how it's going to go. We have a new. It's on. Sorry. We have a new way of communicating with you guys rather than just asking questions that you type. We're going to see if we can maybe have some interaction where you guys can speak your questions and maybe have a little conversation. So I'm going to do a little test. Our CEO, Tim Schnellenberger, is in the house, and his wife is attending this webinar. So I'm going to unmute her and see if we can hear her. All right. So, Anissa.
Hi, everyone.
Hey.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Dave.
Hey.
The webinar has been really great. I've been tuning in every week, and the information has just been invaluable. You guys are doing an amazing job, so thank you so much.
Yeah, of course, Anissa. So I think we actually have a question for you. Mark, what was that question?
Okay, so as the significant other and wife of an alcoholic, do you believe that your husband's alcoholism, even in sobriety, has affected your dogs?
Yes. Yes.
Awesome.
I'm not going to
no need to elaborate
on that. No. Yeah.
All right, cool. So I think that this was a success. All right, really appreciate you participating, Anissa. And
all right, thank you guys.
Enjoy the rest of the session. All right.
Bye.
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 Awesome.
Okay, cool, guys. So that's just a little taste of, that was a test that was successful. We had no idea how that was going to go, but going forward in our next session, we're going to try and have more interaction like that. Rather than typing out all your questions or waiting to hear them answered, we're actually going to engage in more Q&A throughout the entire session as we go through the slides. And that way you'll just have, it'll be more conversational and more informal, and it may even be more effective for us. So my usual shtick is we're going to ask you guys some poll questions. It's going to be a little different tonight because it's going to be all centered around those assessments. So we're going to have some polls related to that. And, if you have any technical issues, feel free to shoot me a question the old-fashioned way with your keyboard, and I'll do my best to help you out. We are going to have Q&A throughout this session, not just at the very end. So I don't know how many questions we'll get to asking live tonight. We may give that a shot if you guys are comfortable with it. But please do send your questions to me. If you feel more comfortable writing them, that's fine too. If we don't get to them, we'll follow up via email next week. And I think that's all I got. Cool.
Yeah.
All right, give you back to Mark. Thanks, guys.
Hey, everybody. So Dave mentioned the vocal questions, and we're going to do that, but I want to encourage them to type those questions as well, because what we're going to do is we're going to open it up for vocalized questions at the end of the segment, I believe, right?
Sure.
Which means that if you type the questions, we can kind of go through and pick the ones, and then he'll flag you, or however the technology works. It's beyond my wheelhouse. But that's how we're going to do it. Also, there was something else I was going to say. Oh, yeah. If you guys were able to hear Anissa, please just send them a quick text. Yes, we heard. Yes, we heard. So we can see if it worked to them as well, because we don't know that.
Smart.
Do we don't? All right. So hi, everybody. And again, I'm super excited to close this out. And hopefully tonight, with this evaluation process, with these assessments, we will be able to actually have a measuring stick of where we started and where we ended up. And I know last week when we asked the question at the end, we had a few less downloads as we expected. So why don't we just go ahead and start off with a poll question right out of the gate? Have you downloaded and answered the assessments?
And listen, if the answer is no, you're not in trouble, but now would be a great time. Tim just did send out an email with all the assessments right there in an attachment. So if you haven't done the assessment, why don't you print them out, download them, fill them out. And that way it'll make the webinar more useful for you when you have some answers to the polls, to the assessments.
What he said.
Well, the good news is it's looking better than last week.
Ooh, I think last week we had only a quarter, I believe, 25%.
Yeah, so now we're at a little over 50 cents.
50 cents. Yay. Our favorite rapper, by the way. Well, that and Machine Gun Kelly.
All right, so I'm gonna close the poll up.
Okay. Awesome. 5644, great. So we at least doubled our download from last week. And those of you that haven't, like Dave said, and Tim sent out an email blast to you guys. So feel free.
It came out like less than an hour ago.
Less than an hour ago, from what I understand. Okay. So let's go ahead and get into these assessments now that you have them in your hand. And hopefully, maybe you can answer them as we're going, or you might have answered them prior. So we're going to focus on this family addiction health and knowledge assessments. Because remember, one of the main points that we stress through this entire process is that you, solely as family members and solely by proximity, get corrupted and in fact infected with the disease of alcoholism. And although it's a mental illness and behavioral, we can catch it, because what we understand neurologically is we tend to absorb the characteristics of the 5 closest people to us over time, which is why it kind of pays to choose your friends carefully. And although you can't choose your family carefully, you can carefully choose how to deal with your family. And that's the key. So the very first assessment we're going to do is we're going to be engaged in the surrender assessment. Talks about your surrender as a family. Then the expectations, your expectations primarily on the identified patient and family member that you have, but also on yourself, as well as the hardest one, which is the resentments, how we harbor resentments. So let's move on to the next slide and talk about these a little bit in depth before we get into the actual assessments. So the first one really, it assesses our level of surrender. And remember, we talked 2 weeks ago about surrender to the disease as a negative connotation, as a negative reality, but it's not. We surrender to the facts of the disease and then empower ourselves to respond to it. Remember that the Oxford English Dictionary defines surrender in its very first definition as joining the winning side. I join the winning side in the fight against the disease. So the first one is really to understand how we as members of an addict's family have in fact surrendered to the facts of the disease, but now allowed ourselves to be dominated by it. The expectations really determine and evaluate our agenda as family, the agenda that you have as the family member, parent, or spouse for the loved one who is the identified patient. And I'm not saying you can't have an agenda. I'm saying that the agenda has to be pragmatic and practical, because remember, control is an illusion, because you're trying to manifest something outside of yourself, which by definition is greater than you. And finally, harboring resentments. And this, like I said, is one of the hardest one, because what we have to do is explore the underlying resentments, because we have been assaulted as family members so often that we've developed not a sheen, a shell, if you will, against that, where we mitigate our own feelings and we just become accustomed to the negative behavior. So a lot of times it's hard for us to come to that point in the moment and realize, you know what, I deserve better than this, and I'm going to do what I can do to make my life better. And then by extension, that health that I provide for myself is going to bleed into the identified patient in the same way that their negative health has bled into me. And so what I would like you to do is to answer affirmatively on those sheets, right, to the statements that describe you at this time. So those of you that did it early on in the beginning will have comparative data for which to understand, okay? So I want you, in fact, to answer affirmative to all those statements that apply, and then keep score for the evaluation, all right? And so let's get into the very first assessment. And it's the surrender assessment. So the very first one is this: if I don't keep up with all my addicted loved one does and all they think, are they likely to relapse? If you agree, score it as an affirmative. If you find that this is not you, that you've drawn a boundary, don't mark that as affirmative. Number two, do I spend a large amount of my day worrying and wondering about my identified patient, about the addicted one? You find that that's somewhat true for you, you should mark it as an affirmative. Number three, do I often question, either in my mind or verbally, the choices that the treatment team is making in regards to my loved one's treatment? Even coming from a place of what we would call novice standard, right? Number four, do I find that I read only about addiction? Am I constantly on the internet looking at possible, what we call easier, softer methodologies? You know, is there a pill? Is there a new helmet that stimulates neuroscience to put on, or some sort of change, you know, get them into acupuncture? Am I looking at multiple other approaches all the time? And do I only read about that and success rates? When I talk to my loved one, do I always ask recovery questions and only recovery questions? You feel that that applies to you, mark it as an affirmative. When I become anxious about my loved one's recovery, do I immediately call them? Do I immediately call them or text them or reach out to them to see how their program is operating at the moment? Am I, in essence, being a long distance sponsor to them on some level? Tim's over here smiling at me. It's making me very uncomfortable. Do I know the name and number of my loved one's sponsor? Do I know who they are? Do I feel the necessity that when I think they may be lying, do I just want to call them and check on them, right? From their sponsor, do I want an outside opinion? If you have those urges, mark affirmative for this one. Do I call the treatment center where my loved one is placed at least once a week? If not, more. And I don't mean calls from the treatment center to you through family sessions, but I mean, are your inquiries a lot when it comes to the family center? Because a lot of times we get resentful at micromanaging their life, but when we turn that management over to someone else, we feel left out and we want to manage more. So on one hand, we're like, I wish they wouldn't ask me to do that. And then we're like, how come they're not asking me to do that? So that's the thing. Am I always waiting for the other shoe to drop and for the bad news to come over the phone? If that's how you feel periodically, if not often, go ahead and mark it as an affirmative. Do I believe, as the parent or spouse of an identified patient, that I am their only real support, that no one knows them or loves them as I do, and I'm the only one that understands their quirks and foibles, and therefore the only one that will support them through everything? Am I afraid to turn off my cell phone? Do I have multiple chargers in my house where it's always on to make sure that if they call with some tragic news, I'll be available? If that applies to you, go ahead and mark it. Am I planning the next treatment for my loved one in case they relapse? Do I already have an interventionist or another place lined up for them? All right. Am I suffering myself from anxiety and related disorders? Lack of appetite, sleep problems, circadian rhythm interruptions. Do I have anxiety? Do I feel depression? Am I withdrawing from my own personal friends and support and my family? If that's a yes, go ahead and answer it. When I'm anxious, do I engage in controlling behaviors? Not just with the identified patient, who let's assume is in treatment at this time, but do I do it with other family members? Is that how I feel a sense of control once again, to try and micromanage the world around me? Because in essence, I really feel powerless. Do I worry almost continuously, periodically, or even at least once a day about my loved one's happiness? Will they be happy? Do I contemplate that a lot? Do I buy things for my loved one when I'm anxious? Even if it's something that's proactive, do I get online and try to find good recovery books on Amazon and send them to his treatment facility? Oh, I found this great book and you should read this one and you got to read this one. And oh, Thich Nhat Hanh's got a new book out and I just read this other thing called The Spirituality of Imperfection. Oh, there's so many great things that I was listening to Dr. Phil. Wow. Do I do that when I'm anxious? Because it's another attempt at control. So that's the end of this. Wait, I think there's one more. There is. If I say no in the final one, of course, I didn't want to leave this one out. If I say no to the person that's in my life that's addicted, am I sure in my mind that they're going to relapse? All right. So let's put up another slide, another poll question. We'll do it right now.
So, but just to be clear, so these guys, once they look at these questions, they're going to be answering whether they agree or disagree.
Right. So here's the thing.
Counting the agrees.
What I would do is I would put a check or an X next to the ones that apply. If they don't apply, leave them blank, right? Like, don't mark them. So what you're trying to do is generate a number out of these. What do we got? 1, 2, 3. I think there's 17 here. So out of these 17 single questions, how many apply to you? How many are like that statement rings true, even on a lower level to you, that you find that to be true if you're really honest? And the key is for you to be honest with yourself about this, because what we're in essence doing is giving you a scorecard to track your own mental health and your own personal recovery in relation to your identified patient. So
let's let the scoring commence.
Yeah, let's go ahead and score these. What do you say? So how did I score is the question. So there's 4 different categories. Was I affirmative, or what applied to me is 0 to 4? Was it 5 to 9? Was it 10 to 14? Or was it 15 and above? Right? And I know that everyone has felt these, all of these at one time or another, but we're trying to keep it in like a, not so much generalized, but a a regular, if you find yourself regularly being in these things, then you should definitely answer in the affirmative. That does apply to me. How much time should we give them on this one, do you think?
A minute or two.
Minute or two.
I can see how many people have responded. We're at about 60%.
Oh, awesome, awesome. So should we let them all respond before should we go for 100%?
Yeah, and I mean, we can leave this up. You know, they don't want to see our ugly mugs any more than they have to.
Granted. Well, they want to see yours. They don't want to see mine. Oh, just as an aside, for those of you that were interested, I did see the dermatologist.
A lot of questions about this.
Okay.
A lot of people want to know.
Okay. So I know you can't see me, but you can hear me. So here's the deal. So I went into the dermatologist and he looked at my head and he said, even though it was technically suspect, according to everything I had read, he says, no, it looks perfectly fine. Well, why don't you take your shirt off and let's look at the rest of you? I told him that I grew up in California and surfed and was in the sun all my life. And of course, he cut 3 suspect things off of me for biopsy that he found on my body. So the head one was groovy. It's the other ones that maybe we'll see. We'll end up. But he said that they don't look bad, but just to be safe, you know, they like lop it off with a thing right into a little cup and send it away. So that's what we're doing.
All right, so I'm going to close this.
All right, we're getting ready to close. Dave, you need a mic over there. Can you hear Dave, by the way? Because that would be important.
I try and speak with
Projection.
Yeah.
Well, if they can hear me swallow my water, they can probably hear you. Yay, awesome. Okay, so none of you are 15 plus. Thank God, because that's a commingling of your disease with the identified patient. So about half of you, very good, are on the low end of the spectrum, which is amazing. Should I tell them about the scoring now, or should we do it later on after all 3? What do you think? Well, let's do it now. We'll do each one, and then I'll just remind you. So really, if you're in the 0 to 4 range, which about half of you are, it really means that a lot of work has been done, right? A lot of work has actually been done. You've been studying, you've been trying to institute these ideas that you've learned, you're manifesting this knowledge and, you know, you're utilizing it fully, and you're really trying to get better and by extension help your loved one. Now, another large portion, 41%, can they see this on there?
I'm leaving it up.
Oh, you're leaving it up, good. Okay, so about 41% of you are in the 5 to 9, which means that you are definitely making progress. You are in the process itself. You are starting to understand the disease. You're starting to help yourself grow, and you're starting to utilize the knowledge you've attained in things like this, in your Al-Anon group, utilizing your sponsor or your Nar-Anon group. I was told to mention Nar-Anon. Any 12-step program for families, Families Anonymous, whatever it is, you're utilizing your sponsor, you're working your own steps, you're writing and declaring boundaries and asserting them in a healthy way. You're starting to use that. The 0 to 4 people are really in there. And if you're honest, that's solid, because that's really an idea of substantial mental health. 10 to 14 would imply that the work has been done. If my guess is if you would ask someone who's new to experience an interaction with an addicted patient, they would answer almost yes to all of them at one time or another, and some quite often. So 10 to 14 implies that you're initially starting the work, that you're starting to learn, you're starting to work your own program, you're starting to seek help in other areas, yet you are still in that area in a fairly high risk of enabling. Because if we look at these assessments, inability to surrender to the professionals, to disease, to the process itself, which we have to trust. You know, people say trust God. You trust God, but I trust the process too. The process is what reveals God in the end. And so you still run a high risk of enabling, because the emotional lability or the emotional frustration that you have in these answering, causing you to be in that mindset and really having that time stolen from you. remember that one of the biggest things in addiction is that addicts are thieves. They steal time, love, and trust. And so even when they're already starting to get help, if you still remain in this area, and it's about 13% of you, it's a marker to show you. I'm not trying to castigate you or shake the shame finger, because you can't see me doing it. But what I'm trying to say is you need to review this material. You need to institute these policies, because even unknown to you, you run the risk of enabling and allowing boundaries to be crossed. And the beauty is that none of you have actually been so high that it shows a complete enmeshment and commingling of disease with the family disease and the identified patient's disease. That 15 plus is a very, very high risk of enabling, continuous enabling, and complete enmeshment with the disease of your child or spouse.
So while we're going over the results, for anybody that has any questions in regards to the surrender assessment
Right.
or anything like that, this is the perfect time to ask questions related to this assessment. And then we'll have one answer,
Right.
one question live and answer live.
So remember, Dave said that we could do these vocal questions. I said, go ahead and type them so we can sift through them and pull them up. So what we'll do is at the end of each one of these assessments, and you want to close the scorecard, at the end of each one of these assessments, if you type in a question, we'll leave the assessment up on the screen. So if you have any questions specifically about maybe one of the areas in which you're still struggling with, like maybe I only talk to them about recovery because I think that's the way to do it, or I still have anxiety, and you have a question regarding a place where maybe you could improve or want to improve, right? Then go ahead and send that. And I guess we will go ahead and try and do those now, because we're trying to get the poll questions not all the way at the end, so we can keep them germane to the slide that's on the table, right? We want that to be fresh in our brain, because sometimes it's hard to recall what slide the questions went to originally. Yeah? Do we have any questions? Or is my capacity to transmit information that stellar? I'm
And listen,
thinking not. Okay, I'm gonna have a drink of water. You guys are gonna get to see it this time.
we don't want anyone to feel uncomfortable, right? So if sharing it out loud is an issue, just let us know that when you ask the question, and I will have no problem voicing it for you. But we do want to encourage the interaction. It makes it much more personal and more powerful for everybody. And one thing that I've learned in recovery is when I'm able to speak and share about my experience, I tend to help so many people without even realizing it. So by vocalizing your own question, you in essence could be helping somebody without even realizing it. So
it's awesome. What we have to remember is, because of the stigmas societally and personally that follow this disease around, what we have is this shame that's really driven by secret, right? And the only power of a real secret is the fact that it's a secret. It's as though we have a bubble of foul on our head, and it weighs us down and makes us scrunch like this. And we try to wash it off and move it around, but it never goes away. What we have to do is we have to puncture that bubble. The bubble is actually the secret. The shit that's inside of the bubble is the trauma. Once you puncture that bubble, the first thing that happens, obviously, is you're gonna kind of get covered. Only now the weight's off and you can wash it off. And when you wash it off, the shame diminishes. And when the shame diminishes, your ability to help somebody without your knowledge increases exponentially. There is no shame in our game anymore, because the facts are never anything to be ashamed about. What they are is they're the door and the key that unlocks that door to growing in health. Do we got a question, Dave?
we have somebody who is willing to speak,
Nice.
but her audio isn't set up on her device, so I can't unmute her. So I'm sending her a chat to see if she's able to. But in the interim, I could definitely ask you something else.
Okay.
So let me ask a question, and then I'll see if there's anyone else in here that might be able to speak their question out loud. All right, so here's one for you.
Okay.
Is it reasonable to expect that my anxiety will be completely resolved, or will I always be susceptible to anxiety?
Okay, the
Because
question,
before the addicted loved one got real bad, there wasn't really any anxiety,
any anxiety.
and now there's no freedom from it.
Okay, so the question is it, what was it? Is it an unrealistic expectation that my anxiety be completely resolved?
She actually asked, is it a reasonable thing to expect?
Yeah, it's reasonable if you have the capacity to transcend physical form and live only in the spiritual realm, sure. But part of being a human being is existential fear and angst, which is the basis of all anxiety. Now, can the anxiety that you have about this disease and the actions of your loved one be mitigated and diminished? Absolutely, unequivocally. Will you return to a state of bliss? I don't know. However, I will say this. Every trauma that I've ever experienced in my entire life has made me enlightened and joyful on the other end in the transcendence of it. So although you may not be free from anxiety, the anxiety may no longer feel like anxiety. It may become prudence and vigilance that allows you to continue to grow as a spiritual individual in your own health and recovery. But the classic, free-floating anxiety will definitely be mitigated. I don't think it's realistic to expect it all to vanish instantaneously. Really, a lot of it is, how do I change my perception of what those critical, kind of poignant, tension-filled issues are? Instead of looking at them with dread, I see them as an opportunity to grow. There's a line from Dr. Bob, and he says that I used to commiserate with all those who suffered. Now I only feel bad for those who suffer in ignorance, who do not know the purpose and ultimate utility of pain. My experience is the purpose and ultimate utility of pain is to grow spiritually and transcend where I was prior. All right, so let's move on to the next slide, shall we, Dick?
Yeah, you want to hit one more question real quick?
Sure, let's do one more question real quick.
Okay, so this one says.
So we got a bunch of stuff to talk about
I
there.
know. In regards to the surrender assessment specifically,
Okay.
this person says, my brain understands this, but not my heart, so I scored a 9. How does this info transfer to my heart?
Okay.
My actions indicate surrender, but not my emotions.
All right. So the question is that intellectually I understand all these things, yet my emotional reality, my heart dictates my answers, and this person scored a 9. How do I transfer from my head to my heart? Well, this is actually one of the hardest questions facing mankind. How the longest distance is between my head and my heart. And they said that their actions reflect their intellect, yet emotionally they still feel that kind of stress and anxiety. I would say that it's a classic example of fake it till you make it. Cognitive therapy in general is acting your way into right thinking. Even if at the beginning you feel as though the result of those actions are not affecting your emotional or heart-based reality, continued diligence and commitment to those behaviors will absolutely change the emotional reality that you're in, right? When we say act your way into right thinking or fake it till you make it, we don't mean fake the action. It's impossible to fake an action. What you have to fake is an attitude. And what attitude are you faking? You are pretending to be the person that believes unequivocally 100% that these actions are going to work. Because what happens is when you put that pretense of this is going to work, this is going to work, this is going to work, it will start working, whether you are aware of it or not. And you will slowly start to emotionally embrace the change. And all of a sudden, you're no longer pretending that you believe it's going to work. You know that it does. So continue, have commitment, be steadfast, because the fruits will be born of those actions, both in your heart and your mind, and holistically in your spirit. I guarantee it. And I know it's hard because they're incremental in change and they're hard to notice. Diligence, consistency, and protracted commitment. That's the key. You will feel better, I promise.
Okay, so I know we have to move on, but we do have a ton of questions, so we may just have to get to them either at the end if we have time,
Okay.
or we'll answer them after the fact.
Okay,
But I think we need to move on.
let's move on. So we're gonna move on to the next. Uh-oh. Did I do it right? Yeah, I did. Look at that. So the next one is an expectation assessment, right? So it starts off by this. Oopsie, went the wrong way. I expect that my loved one will get over this phase of their life, that this is just a hiccup. If you have that expectation or ever have, mark that as affirmative. I expect that my loved one will go to college as we have always planned. I expect that they will complete college and have a career as we have always planned. I expect that my loved one will be a professional. I expect that my loved one will have that professional career, and I also expect that they will get married and have children like normal people, reinforcing that stigma. I expect that my loved one will follow in the family business or the career path that we have maybe nudged them towards. I expect that my loved one will attend social functions where alcohol is being served without having any stress at all, as though this has never happened. I expect that my loved one will get over the need to be a member of the society and participate in the fellowship of AA eventually. They'll take their medicine, they'll get better, and they'll move on. I expect that my loved one will ultimately engage in a quote unquote normal life where addiction is but a passing memory and a thing of the past. I expect that my loved one will want to maintain a close connected relationship with me. I have an expectation that my loved one will be reunited with his siblings and stay close. They will forgive him and everything will be wonderful like when they were 6. I expect that my loved one will be different completely and no longer exhibit the characteristics that I personally identify with addiction. I expect that my loved one will become an active member of my church. I expect that my loved one will live his adult life in close physical proximity to me, or at least contact, very close. I expect that my loved one will surrender all the resentments against me the second they get sober, instantaneously washed over with a sense of deep unconditional love for me. I expect that my loved one will give up their immature patterns of behavior immediately the second they stop drinking. I expect that my loved one will never tell anyone about his addiction, because how would that look? I expect that my loved one will always struggle with active addiction. I expect that my loved one will make all his friends only in the recovery community and not be a part of the world at large. I expect that my loved one will become a sponsor immediately. Immediately. Is that the last one? It is indeed. So let's go ahead and let's put up the poll again. Uh-oh, this one only has 2 that I can see. 0 through 4 or 5 through 9.
I see 10 through 14 and 15 plus on mine.
I don't. Okay, well, how did I score, everybody? I don't see it on mine.
Weird.
Maybe it is weird. Yeah, I can't figure it out. Technology is not my strong suit.
So if you have 10 or more, don't answer.
No, answer. Please answer. If you got 10 or more, answer. I'm not going to make
Looks like they can only see 2 also.
Oh, really?
Oh, no, I see there's 15 plus.
Oh, okay. We're good. Never mind.
Yeah, there we go. That's weird.
So maybe only the healthy people got the short abridged version. And the ones that are working toward health got the longer one. Or maybe it's the other way around, that this is a psychological motivation technique. I doubt it.
I don't know.
Do you like the red gum or the blue gum better?
I think I like the blue,
Do you really?
but I've yet to do the combo.
Did you try the red one?
Yeah.
Yeah. We found new gum, new sugar-free gum. We're big fans of gum.
Yeah.
It's a thing.
Nothing like a good chew.
That's what I say.
Yeah. And again, always remember, if questions are coming up as you're scoring this, feel free to send them in. I know you guys had a bunch for the surrender assessment, so sorry we just don't have the time to get to everybody now, but we will get back to you soon. But any questions on the expectations assessment, shoot them my way now so we can post some right after we see the results.
I can see the progress in
Oh, you
real
can?
time.
Cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
You see 66%?
No, I don't, but I see what's going on. Oh yeah, I do see 66% voted. Awesome. So if you didn't hear Dave, let me reiterate. If you got any questions specific to any of these statements, go ahead and type them in after you've answered your poll question, and then Dave will cycle through them, and he'll be like the call screener or the question screener.
Yeah.
And then maybe he'll pick somebody.
And so the one hiccup we're running into here is if you guys are participating in our webinar on the web-based version, it's not going to allow me to unmute you to actually ask your question live. So if that is you, that doesn't matter. Still send me your question, and I will ask it for you. All right.
What's the web-based version?
So you can either have the GoToWebinar program on your computer, and that will allow you to talk, or you can just click on our link, and it'll take you to a website to watch it. So those people can.
So
If
maybe
they're on their phones or if they've downloaded it.
So in the next
That
session,
works.
it would probably be wise that
Yeah.
everybody download the program.
Yeah, so we'll talk about that towards the end. So let's look at the results.
And the results are in. 74% voted. All right, so 51% of you, which is half, are in that very healthy. Much work has been done. I've learned. I'm starting to integrate these policies and ideas into my life. I'm actively forming boundaries. I'm actively engaged in my own health. I have a sponsor. I'm going to support groups. I'm doing the work for my own mental health, right? And then about 31% of you, again, very good. The vast majority are in the lower range, in the progressing range. You're progressing. You're starting to understand the ideas. You're starting to implement these things. You understand the disease. You understand the protocols of healing, both for your loved ones and yourself. You're starting to utilize this knowledge that you're acquiring. We have 14% that are motivated to do the work, that have started, that are still in the area where they're struggling emotionally or intellectually with some of these ideas, old ideas being hard to break, hard to institute new boundaries, but you're still motivated and engaged, and still, unbeknownst to you, because of your maybe lack of surrender, maybe lack of, or self-doubt, I would say, it still runs the risk of enabling. And here we have a small percentage that has expectations, and these are the expectations that you project on your loved one, which means that without even knowing it, you run a very high risk of enmeshment, where you are in essence on a certain level, and I don't want to be critical, but on a certain level, trying to live the life of your child or spouse for them, in essence, a projection of your desire onto them, and which in actuality becomes somewhat generally adversarial to the addict. They receive it that way, and in doing that actually increases the risk of enmeshment and enabling behaviors in that relationship, right? So
I'm gonna hide the results so we can put up the statements.
Perfect.
And see if anyone has any questions about any one of those specific expectations that you find you do struggle with placing on your loved one, and we'll see if we can get Mark. I'll read the question if you can't speak it, and we'll see if we can get some answers. So hit us with questions. You guys know we love questions.
Yep. And understand that it's okay to have plans instead of plots, but expectations tend to make whatever that plan is hyper specific and tend to be like trying to focus somebody in a mold. So, I mean, it's okay to desire for your child to go to college and have a professional career. But, you know, if you really invest that much effort into it and focus them to like which department or this is what you have, there's a time constraint, it's going to be adversarial. And so that's when it becomes expectational instead of goal-based or plan-based. So like these things in a lowered kind of intensity can just be, I mean, you could almost look at them as boundaries, right? But it all depends on what you emotionally invest in the drive. And again, expectations are resentments under construction because they're failed attempts to control. Those fails of control become resentments, and resentments are going to be the very next assessment, right? These things, it's interesting that these they follow a trend. One leads into the other. It's a very ipso facto, right? If this, then that. That's what tends to happen, right?
So we have someone, Sheila asks these expectations are not healthy, that she's curious, is these expectations that she has puts too much pressure on her addicted loved one? So it's a little clarification there.
Yeah.
I just sent Sheila a message asking what her score was.
Okay. So yeah, so the expectations, if you project them intensely on the other person, it's almost a demand in essence, right? And really an expectation is it's very interesting because I have an idea in my head and I want the person that I love to comply to that idea. And I expect them to, which is really problematic because they're not really in my head. And even if I vocalize my expectation, I have already created an entire picture of what that looks like, which means that I am going to be continuously let down by whatever that expectation is, because the subtleties and minutia of that expectation are not met, because it's impossible to transmit so much complexity, right? And so expectations which are forced tend to be these kind of driving interventions and attempts at control. To have an idea versus an expectation. I have an idea, I have a goal, I have a hope, I have a wish. I have an expectation, it's kind of an intellectual demand. This is how it has to be, or I will not be happy, or I will not be comfortable, or I will never be fulfilled. That's it. It's really the projection of your need for that to happen that way through them, as opposed to lovingly directing and coaching, which allows them to grow in their own way, right? So yes, generally speaking, expectations are not good because they're reliance on other people. And when you rely on other people, listen, I'm not saying people will always fail you. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that reliance on other people is, it's untenable. It's hard to grab a hold of because there's just too many variables. The most important being the human's capacity to choose, right? So
in essence, Sheila followed up by asking what are healthy expectations. It would almost be argued that healthy boundaries are the solution.
Correct, correct. In essence, you could, and this may be simplistic, but you can in essence say that all boundaries are unhealthy. I mean, all expectations are unhealthy and all boundaries are healthy because they're in essence a healthy manifestation of that expectation. Because remember, we talked about this at length last week, that the boundary is not to get someone to conform to my desire or expectation. It's to prevent me from being harmed when they don't, right?
So before we move on, I'd like to just share what Alice just shared with me.
Hi, Alice.
Hey, Alice. So first, she answered in a very healthy way, and I'm not sure if she even realized it, but awesome. The progress that she's making. So secondly, she kind of Tarantino'd it and gave us the question as the answer, almost like a Jeopardy type deal.
Ooh.
The second thing she sent me was that my expectations are that he, my son, should want to get help and solve his issues, yet he doesn't. So the first thing she asked was, is it reasonable to set a boundary and have our son move out, since he is drinking every night and walked out of a therapy session yesterday and left the hospital after seizures? He complains about his anxiety and depression, but yet doesn't seek help. We can't make him help himself, but is it best to make him move out to protect ourselves, knowing full well it will be a negative result for him?
Well, what you perceive as a negative result is a convoluted expectation, because what may appear on the surface to be a negative part of a long-term result may be the thing that propels to a positive overall result. Now, well, that was a long question. So let's start from the beginning. Excellent, Tarantino. First of all, the way you switched that around was great. And yes, okay. If you allow this person to live in your house and continue to drink at the possibility of seizures and all of these things, that means they are deep in their addiction. You are, in essence, giving them a carte blanche to kill themselves in your house. And this kind of forced intervention by ejection from your property is, in fact, the type of intervention that causes people to make their own decision. To have an expectation that they want to get better and get help when they're not, and when the circumstance is, unfortunately, that they have a place that is conducive to them getting worse, is a faulty expectation. Putting them out of the house will force their hand. It is tough love. It is incredibly difficult to do, and you have to do it. The other option is to find your child dead in your house. And that is not an option that any parent should go through. And putting them in the vice of tension and stress caused by their behavior is the thing that can throw that switch to fulfill the expectation you have about them going to treatment. So yes, the boundary is the solution to that expectation. Having that boundary not allow them to kill themselves in your house, not enabling them to do that, and not being a part of it or culpable in that action is the boundary you set. The result of that for them is negative. However, that negative becomes a positive. The trauma leads to the health. That's the way it works. And if you make it way, way difficult for them, they're going to do something that they need to do to make their life less difficult.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's incredible because Alice has been with us since the beginning.
You're awesome.
And I just wanted to make a note that just even asking the question, if it's okay to set this boundary and to be thinking in that regard, in regards to healthy boundaries rather than how to enable or be codependent with my child, shows significant progress, and that's amazing to see.
Huge.
So we really like seeing that. And we never want to forget about Al-Anon. When in doubt, always go to an Al-Anon meeting, try and get a sponsor. You know, those are supports and resources that you guys can utilize.
Sponsor. The steps will help you grow. The meetings support you. You bring your problems to your sponsor. They walk you through the steps. They allow you, they give you advice, but they allow you to come to good decisions on your own with the aid of your own higher power. And then you bring that solution back to the meeting to help the other person that comes in that look just like you when you got there.
Yeah, just like the alcoholic that has unrealistic expectations. They take those to their sponsor.
Yep.
And then they get a dose of truth.
Yep.
And they're the better for it.
They are.
And they know to just let those expectations go.
Right. Yeah. Like I said, the resentment's under construction. I don't think I've ever had an expectation in my entire life that's been fulfilled, with one exception. And I'll say this: in the 12-step paradigm, the third step states that we have the ability to decide what our own God is, our own higher power of our own understanding, as we understood Him, or lack thereof, as it were. And really, that enables me to have expectations on divinity, on my higher power, and those I have never been let down on, because it's not about whether it's going to happen, it's about when, right? And my experience is that God always answers prayers. Sometimes the answer is no. It's just that simple.
Okay, so for those of you whose questions we didn't get to, we will follow up, but we're going to move on to the next assessment.
Next assessment. All right. So what do we got going on here? Harboring resentments. Remember, expectations are the gateway or the parent of resentment. I harbor resentments against my loved one for lying to me. They do that all the time. I have resentments. Now remember, let me just say this, resentment comes from the Latin ressentio, which means to refeel or rethink. That means if this thing bothers you, a lot of people, you tell them they have resentment, like, I don't hate that person. I'm not super angry at them. It's not about that. It's about whether that thing lingers in your head. If it causes you pause, if it makes you feel some sort of way, as the kids say, it's a resentment because it's a refeeling, right? It cycles. I'm resentful at them for manipulating me. I am resentful at them from stealing from others and from me. I am resentful at my loved one for placating me and giving me platitudes and yes, ma'am, and yeah, and whatevering me all day long. I am resentful of them for bullying me. It's very brutal. Happens all the time. Alcoholics are amazingly good at taking emotional hostages. I am resentful at them for violating the boundaries I did have organically before I knew how to develop more severe, more intense boundaries because of this disease. I am resentful at them for verbally abusing me, which happens continuously. I'm resentful at them for destroying my property. I'm resentful at them for racking up hospital bills and treatment bills. I'm resentful at them for putting me in the position where I have to pay their expenses for treatment and being fixed. I'm resentful at them for constantly seeking something from me, always wanting. I'm resentful at them for just displaying poor judgment. They weren't raised that way. They're not idiots. They know better. I'm resentful at them for embarrassing me, for putting me in circumstances where I had to excuse their behavior or make up lies to people that I know and love. All right? I'm resentful at them for flunking out of college. I'm resentful at them for wasting money, like they're born a Rockefeller, like not understanding the value. I'm resentful at them for taking advantage of my connections in the work world, having me stand for them and vouch for them, and then it backfiring and them embarrassing me. I'm resentful at them for selling drugs and becoming a criminal and engaging in criminal behavior. Understand this, every drug addict and alcoholic in the world is a felon. They may not be convicted, they may not even be arrested, but they are felonious. Because every time they buy an illicit drug or drive even slightly drunk, they are in fact committing a felony. I am resentful of them for putting me in the position to pay legal expense after legal expense after legal expense. I'm resentful of them for hurting other people, the people that I love. I'm resentful at them for treating others and myself with disrespect. I'm resentful at them for creating anxiety in my life and destroying my peace of mind and serenity. I'm resentful at them for damaging my marriage, for causing rifts between me and my spouse, for fracturing us and triangulating us against each other as a way to avoid looking at them. I'm resentful at them for damaging the relationship with my family. Now remember, if any of these spring up to you in the moment, write a question, type it in. If you have a ping, any kind of emotional response, go ahead and write that up. I am resentful at my loved one for damaging my relationships with my friends. All right, that's the end of that list. So let's go ahead and plug the poll.
Yeah.
And remember, answer the poll, type the questions, and we'll get to those questions.
And this one I think rings home to me a lot just because of our work here, you know, and how many of our clients come in with their own resentments, just totally crippling them from progress.
Yeah.
And how much work we do on them here at RBC to help them understand the fatality of those resentments.
So the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous says that resentments are the #1 offender. It kills more alcoholics than anything on the planet, because this is how it works. The resentment, if I allow myself to be angry, to be resentful, because I have an organic default state of not owning my own behavior or owning my own culpability for the bad things that happen to me, or at least my complicity in them, every time I replay that little tape in my head, I change the narrative ever so slightly to the point where now I start to become more and more of a victim of circumstance, and more of a victim of the people in those circumstances, and more a victim of a cosmic conspiracy to keep me down. And for me as an alcoholic, I relish those resentments, because in those resentments, I move from having responsibility for my own life to being a complete victim of a universal conspiracy to destroy me and keep me unhappy. And once I arrive squarely in the place of being ultimate victimhood, I am now entitled to behave any way I want, always, because I got that coming, because the world and everyone in it is out to get me. And that is the number one rationalization that keeps people using. So we see at Recovery Boot Camp how deep and deadly resentments are. Because when we harbor resentments, we drink. And when we drink, we die, right? There's a line in the big book on page 66, and it says, "A life that includes deep resentment and anger leads only to futility and unhappiness. To the precise extent do we permit these, do we squander the hours that might be worthwhile," right? And this is infinitely grave for us as alcoholics, because it shuts us off from the sunlight of the spirit, and we drink again and we die. That means every moment that I spend in anger or resentment at someone or something, I now steal from myself a moment to live. And as a recovered alcoholic and addict myself, I have wasted my biggest regret, and probably my only real regret in the world, is that I didn't get sober sooner, that I didn't get sober when I knew I needed to. That means that I spent copious, huge, massive amounts of time and threw it away. And now I am not willing to do that again. And every second that I spend in anger or resentment at somebody is another second I squander. And the seconds of my life, time, is the only limited gift that I've given from the universe. I have a limited amount. I'm not willing to squander any more of it.
All right, so time for the results.
What's the red card for?
Oh, I was just moving.
I thought you were going to shut me down. Dave's got a red card when I tend to get verbose, and he like, all
No,
right,
that was good information.
all right. So how did I score?
This
Well,
one's interesting.
it is interesting. Wow. Very, very interesting. So as we started, what you'll see is we've noticed that the graphics are changing. And why are they changing? Well, because to go from the very first assessment, which was surrender, which was somewhat obvious, into then expectations, which are a little bit more sophisticated, and finally into resentments, which are valid a lot of times, we find that we have self-righteous indignation about them because they're true. It really happened. So in essence, what we're seeing is we're seeing the numbers change because of the subtlety and sophistication of these markers.
We may have just gotten to the real issue here.
Yeah. So what we see is that as we become healthier in our own life, we're able to suss out and differentiate the subtleties, right? We're able to recognize and own more of our sophisticated problems, more of our more subtle manifestations of negative character, right? So we had a complete change. You pulled the graphic off, but that's okay.
I can show it again. You want to see it again?
No, it's good. So we got 34% are in the really good work. We have a higher level of ones that are working. But oddly enough, now we find, because it's more subtle and unrecognizable, because we feel somewhat entitled to these resentments because they happened. Now you can put it off. And then at the end, it's also a high number. So what's the issue? Granted, I'm fairly sure that every single thing on this list was done to you at one time or another. However, if you continue to hold the resentment, remember, if you squander that time where you could be spent in love of your family, development of spirituality, and healing of your own self, if you squander that time holding on to that resentment, understand this. Let's say your loved one is in treatment and working towards their own health, and you hold these resentments based on the fact that they are valid. There is veracity to every single one of these things. I'm not denying that. However, here's the truth. Your biggest upset, if you combine these all into one resentment, I'm resentful over what they did to me. So understand this. Holding that resentment, while they're getting better, they are doing it to you again, even though they're not actually doing it. I heard a speaker once at Founders Day in Akron, Ohio. She was a woman in her 70s who had years and years sobriety. And the topic was that resentments burn the pot that they boil in, no one else. And you have to be willing to let go of these, because you, in essence, are re-injuring yourself every time you have that resentment and have that thought and have that feeling. You are hitting them with the stick. You're hitting yourself with the stick that they originally hit you with. And they don't even know where the stick is, and they're off doing their business and getting better. You're allowing yourself to be re-injured over and over and over again. So understanding that, yes, these things are all valid, but no, I do not need to hold on to that resentment is the thing that allows you to forgive yourself and, by extension, then the loved one. All right, so let's just jump up to the closer, right?
Can I just share one thing?
Yes,
I know we're
absolutely.
running late, guys, but we do have some stuff to wrap up, and this is the last one. So
Hang out.
humor us.
Did we have any drop off in attendance, or is everybody still?
No, we're pretty consistent.
Nice.
But, somebody did share something that's pretty powerful, so I just wanted
Beautiful.
to. It's not even so much a question as just a
Statement.
statement that was brought about as a result of the harboring resentments assessment. So I'm going to read this one word for word.
Perfect.
See if you have anything to say about it. It says, I just want to scream and yell at my son for putting me and our family through hell. I think he's a sociopath and feels entitled, and he never apologizes for the damage he has done. My husband and I have good boundaries and are detached with love, but I really don't like him and feel bad about that. I harbor resentment for most everything on the list. He does not live with us and never will. We don't give him money. He's sober 60 days, but he's already said when he gets out of rehab, he thinks he can use like an average person. My answer to that was, that's interesting.
Whoever you are, I love you. You're on point. Good. So let me just say this. God, I feel it. I know it. I understand it. That single statement is you allowing your emotional state right now to be controlled by your son who's in treatment. Regardless of what he does and what he wants and where he goes, he is not even thinking about you at this very second. I guarantee it. It's the evening. He's probably at a meeting ogling a girl. But you are beating yourself up with his behavior over and over again. You have to get over this hurdle. It is the most sophisticated, most subtle, and most deadly hurdle for you in terms of your own mental health. I wish I could take your pain away. I wish I could take your resentment. Hit the heavy bag, yell at God, do all kinds of crazy stuff, but do not allow yourself to be tortured by your family member when he's not around. And I'm going to say this. I reference the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous a lot. It's kind of a text that I enjoy. There is one single rule in the first 164 pages, the entire body of the text. Everything else is a suggestion. In fact, the second to the very last paragraph of the closing of the book says, our book is meant to be suggestive only. We realize we know only a little. God will constantly disclose more to you and to us. Ask him in your morning meditation what you can do for the man who is still sick, and great events will come to pass if your own house is in order. But obviously, you cannot transmit something you haven't got. So the close of the book tells you this whole thing is just, it's a giant suggestion. There is one exception. There is a code, the only rule in the entire big book. And it says, love and tolerance is our code. It doesn't say we gotta like anybody, especially when they continue to abuse us. Sometimes the strongest thing of love that you can do is to completely disassociate from the person who continues to hurt you until they can get to the part where they can love themselves enough to not hurt you anymore.
Nice.
All right. So let's go to the last slide real quick. Just a quick run through because it's super short. It's just a review of the scoring system. In an honest evaluation, a score of 0 represents complete surrender and Al-Anon health. The truth, though, is that most of us, right, even the most healthy, will qualify in the affirmative for at least 4 in each assessment, given any day of the week or any situation or event that's occurring. Score of 5 to 9 means that work's being done to heal the family and you as a and all the members of the family. Score of 10 to 14 implies that although work is in progress, you are still at high risk for enabling. And 15 and above indicates that there's a high level of enmeshment and a very high probability of enabling and a very low probability of sustainable boundaries. All right, so I'm gonna ask Dave to jump up here and join me because we're gonna talk about some stuff. The upcoming series, the next cycle.
I'm gonna make us full screen.
Make us big, Dave.
Full screen.
He's gonna make us big.
All right.
Wow, we're big.
Yeah, we are.
All right. So we're closing off the cycle tonight, and we're going to start a new cycle, a few weeks, and it's going to be different. So we've taken all your suggestion, all your input, and all your advice, and we've finessed, right, the entire process and the curriculum. And so in essence, what we're going to do is we're responding to all your feedback, and we're going to change the overarching curriculum. The syllabus is going to be minimized. We're going to cut it to about half, give or take. And we're doing this because we're changing the format and we want it to be slightly different. As you see, we got through 3 slides and it took an hour with the questioning. So what we're doing is we're diminishing the copious amounts or too many amount of minutia, small detailed information, and we're bringing it to more general ideas so that you can bring the questions to us. So in the next cycle, we're going to cut it down and we're going to go towards a live only approach, right? So it's going to be far more interactive, right? We're going to do Q&A every single time. We're going to do it in sections or maybe even slides, depending on the motif or the topic at that moment. And we're going to allow for voice questions, right?
Yeah, it's going to focus primarily more on the family's role and not as much on the identified patient. We really want to keep it to what's best for you guys out there and how you can best help yourself to formulate more healthy boundaries and really see more progress on these 3 assessments.
Right.
We're going to focus on the details that come along with that,
right,
primarily.
So we're going to remove a lot of the IP data, a lot of the historical data, a lot of the data about the disease modeling and things like that. We're going to increase the family data, right? We're going to spend more time, less modeling, less disease, more focus on family recovery, right? There's going to be more about enabling, about constructive boundaries. So really the things that we got into in the end, the real family oriented, more about the pathology of growing in health for the family and their interactions with the identified patient, less about the disease model, less about the patient's progress and their path in recovery and more about yours. There's also a thing that we're going to be doing. We are no longer going to have the recordings available, right? We're trying to move to a straight format of live because we like the interaction and we like to have people vocalize and ask questions and do it in the moment. It tends to be a lot more intense, right?
Yeah, I mean, most of the feedback we got is that, people that are watching live are in the moment. They're able to ask questions, hear other people's questions, they're in it. And then when they go back and watch a previous session maybe that they missed on their own, it just doesn't feel the same. Something is missing. So we want to focus more on trying to get as many people involved in the moment as possible. So that is why past sessions are not going to be available, which means, well, in the moment, right? Once we're finished with the cycle.
Right. So we're going to do, we're going to compress the entire thing and edit it. And we're going to present it as a DVD with a workbook. And that workbook's going to not only have all the information, but there's going to be exercises and more things to add, like writing, assignments, exercises, things you can do to help develop your own technique and skills in this thing. And it's going to be available at the end of the next course section, right? And it's going to be, you're going to be able to acquire it in a full package. So there'll be a full video DVD or downloadable or whatever the format is we choose with an actual book workbook and exercises. So we're not going to post every week like we did up until now. Plus we're going to cut it, we're going to shorten it. So it's going to be maybe 8 weeks versus 15 or 16. And at the end of the cycle, you can acquire the entire package. And then you can go through it again and do the workbook and all that. And it's interesting because you'll be able to hear your own questions. You'll be able to see the interactive, right? Also, another big thing is we're changing the airtime, right? I believe.
Let me interject.
Sure.
Denise asked how long the current webinar recordings will be available. I'm going to go ahead and leave them on. The ones that we've done from this series.
Okay.
So if you've missed any, so this is week 14 of this first series for Basic Training Family Edition. I know some people have joined midway. There may even, I think we even had a couple new people join for the first time this evening, and I'm sure your heads were spinning in week 14 of this program. So fear not. I've posted in the chat box the link where you can download all of the previous, you don't even have to download them. You can just click on them and watch them. So all 14 will be up and those will stay up. But when we start our next series, we're not going to be posting those in real time. We're going to wait until the end and then make it available for you guys in its entirety.
Right. Because we think that having the input back and forth in this new adjusted format really can pinpoint it to the individual's need and necessity in the moment, right? Because it's almost like we're going to do an education, but we're also going to do somewhat of a therapeutic approach in essence, right? It's almost like a family session, which we're trying to figure out how to like blend those two realities. And so we're going to change the airtime because we compress the overall event. We do have a lot of information still that needs to be transferred, even though we're shaving it down. But what we're going to do is, because of this interaction, we're going to need a longer window at the live session. So we're moving the time frame. Where airtime is now going to be at 7:30 instead of 8, and it's going to run to about 9 o'clock. So we're going to have about for sure an hour and a half, right? Or at least an hour and 15 minutes full. And you know, we always bid an hour and we end up going an hour and 15 anyway. So we're going to expand that. So there'll be a lot more interaction.
And keep in mind that's Eastern time. I know we got some West Coasters out there. I don't think I've seen any Hawaii, but we have some Central, some Mountain. So that's going to be 7:30 p.m. Eastern time.
We had that email from the lady in Australia who said it was 3 o'clock in the morning. So
yeah, like next Friday.
Yeah, next Friday. It was next Friday in Australia.
So
space-time continuum gets bent over there. So yeah, we're going to start 7:30. And there's going to be a blast to everybody initially, I'm sure, all the registrants.
Yeah, everybody's going to have to re-register. So since you're registered here with us now, you will automatically receive a re-registration for the new one. So the same process, your name, your information, phone number, basic stuff to register for the next cycle.
Right, and also remember that Dave mentioned earlier that if you're just looking at through the web portal, you can't actually speak, which means that if you want to participate, we're trying to do it like classroom style. If you want to be able to have a voiced comment or a voiced question, you have to download the app.
Or you can use your phone, which may
Yeah.
be easier for some people. So those are the two avenues we're going to highly suggest for the next series, is that you either do it mobily on your phone where you have the audio capability, or you go to GoToMeeting or GoToWebinar.com and actually download the application, use it from your computer. You download it like software.
And you, even without it, you'll still be able to type, but you just won't be able, I think it'll be like less participatory.
Yeah, but it is a free software, so don't worry about that. If you're a stickler for that kind of thing, I get it. So it'll be free software, or just use your mobile device, and that way you'll be able to contribute.
I think we have one more
Verbally.
poll question too, don't we?
Yeah, I think that would be good to ask in a minute after we reveal our next big project.
All right, we'll do that after the review.
Okay, who wants to do the reveal?
I mean,
Dave.
okay,
Should we Rochambeau like at your wedding?
yeah, only one takes.
Okay.
Ready? Rock, paper, scissors, shoot.
All right.
But let me just do it.
Table set.
Okay, so the next thing we're really excited about is we are taking this amazing, little crazy at times series that we're doing here online. We're taking it on the road, and it's going to be a live in-person educational summit. It's happening. We're really excited about it. It's going to be like Rabbi Mark on steroids, if you can believe it, because there's going to be more than just this presentation. We're working on getting some other facilities involved. There's going to be stuff for different genders. I know we're a male-only facility. We're working to get some female-only facilities so you guys can ask questions that are gender-specific. We're going to have guest speakers. It's going to be a whole weekend, and it's going to be live and in person. We're really excited about it. The great news is that it's definitely happening. So that being said, the one thing we are actively looking for is your feedback on where it should happen. Yeah.
And it's gonna be,
Yeah.
we have a bunch of hotels figured out, we're talking to.
Right.
And
Yes,
so
we
it's gonna
got
be in
to.
a conference room at one of the, you guys will repeat what I'm saying. It'd be in a conference room at one of the hotels that we choose, and depending on which city, it'll depend on what hotel we're gonna use.
Yes. So, with a conference or a summit of this kind, there's hotels involved. We would be renting out the conference room. We would have the whole area. There'd probably be like muffins and croissants and things of that nature.
I love muffins.
Yeah, who doesn't? So we're going to have all of that stuff figured out. So we do have hotels available, and we have narrowed it down, at least for our first summit, to 2 possible locations. So if you guys are still out there listening to us, hopefully you are, we would like your input. Now, we can't put a million places on here. Unfortunately, we couldn't do that, right? So we've narrowed it down to 2 main locations, and we'd like to ask a poll to see which one would be more feasible for you guys to make it to. Because we wouldn't be able to do this without your support, which has been incredible so far. And we just really would like your input on this. So Tim put up the poll question, and hopefully you guys can give us some input.
And remember, this is the first one. Hopefully, we're looking to do this
Quarterly.
initially quarterly, and maybe more down the line. And which means coming to your town soon. However, you will be able to get in on the ground floor of this amazing event Sunday.
But there's a lot of reasons to do it. But
Yeah.
primarily is you guys have all been attending this webinar, but almost independently of one another.
Yeah.
We're all in this thing together. So to come to a place where you're actually able to meet people going through what you're going through, and to bond with them over that, and figure out how to heal together and help one another is a pretty amazing experience and opportunity. And that's something we are excited to be a part of and to try and make happen, but we wouldn't be able to do it without you guys. So.
And you become the apostles of this message, in essence, not to use a religious term, but you do, and you bring it forth, as it were. And coming together and bonding, and trust me, the group that you guys form together will probably transcend onto like a group that's on whatchamacallit, like a Facebook group or a Google group where you can have your own meetings. You can be there over the weekend. You give mad support to each other, understanding the commonality. The book says that we come together because of a shared trauma and suffering. We stay together in unity because of a shared solution, and we know each other. And that's what allows us to hear the solution. And that's the beauty of this whole thing, right? And we're trying to foster these communities to spread out, right? We want to create a disease of health, right? And we want to spread that.
This guy's pretty ambitious, isn't he?
I got mad ideas.
Yeah. Crazy mad ideas.
Mhm.
So should we share the results, or is it just for our own edification?
Should we share?
Yeah,
Maybe,
share 'em.
maybe we should share them
Because
in the
then somebody
first
will change
session
their
of the
mind.
next series.
Okay, ready?
No, yeah, sure.
All right, guys, here
Go
come
ahead.
the results.
South Florida wins. Yeah. No, I don't
Nice.
know. Nice. Yeah.
It's the sun.
It is the sun.
Yeah, you know, because it's going to be a weekend, so you get to make a little vacation out of it. Come down to sunny South Florida. I think that's really exciting. That's good news.
Somebody wrote, how about New York City?
New York City.
So, and again,
great.
keep in mind, this is hopefully the first of many,
Right.
right? So we're going to start with these locations, and then hopefully with your support, we'll be able to grow and reach many more people in many different places.
Yeah. Remember that health is contagious and love is contagious, just like the diseases. And when you spread that, trust me, I know that you've suffered, but suffering alone or being in solution together, it's not even a choice. Not at all. Come up here.
All right. Should we thank everybody?
We should.
I think we should.
All right.
Right.
Thank mom and pop.
Oh, Howard, Beverly, thank you so much.
Yeah, we couldn't have done this without you guys. Really appreciate your support and everything you're doing for the foundation. It means a lot.
Recovery Boot Camp.
Yeah, they're awesome.
Yeah,
We're here.
I mean,
We're
that
in the
goes without
building,
saying.
like, you know.
Recovery Boot Camp, our family, our friends, all of you out there showing all the support.
Hi,
Really means a
Carolyn.
lot.
That's my
Hi, Katrina. Hi, Mom.
Katrina's
Hey,
his
Nessa.
wife, and this is his wife.
All right. Listen, thank you all for showing up and participating. It really means a lot to us. Really want to get out there and help as many people as possible. And you guys are the fledgling recovering parents. And you guys are inspiring us to do this more and more and more. Thank you.
Take what you learned, share it with other people. We love you.
Yep,
Hope
we'll see you guys
again.
soon. Thank you.
Thank you.